Hey, welcome to episode 182 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined by Tettles and Trell.
Silent Wave.
Silent Wave. Good. Good maneuver. Give me a little bit of a fear that I haven't unmuted. It's all good.
Oh, dude.
This week we have a few things. We have Brackenhide Hollow is our dungeon that we're going to take a look at. And of course we have a bunch of news and class changes and M+ stuff and great push to talk about as well. So this is should be a reasonably content-filled episode, because the title push, there's interesting stuff around that. There's interesting stuff around just augmentation and M+ in general. They've continued to make it better and better at being detected in the logs, how much damage is coming from the evoker. Things are, I feel, kind of weirder than they were 2 weeks ago, even when it launched. Now that it's been out for longer, I don't know. I mean,
we kind of hammered it last week, right? In our first show back, Aug Evoker, and so since then they nerfed it, but then they changed it to show up correctly in logs, and it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, this thing is just as good as we expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they've nerfed every one of the M+ new specs.
By the way,
specs since then.
This week sucks ass for pushing. Bolstering sucks.
Yes, it does.
It's abnormally hard in very specific dungeons. I think it's in Nelth Slayer, it's not that bad. But then you look at Uldamon and Halls of Infusion, and you're really, really struggling. Freehold also, first pull of Freehold with the Enforcers is you have to outrange the Enforcer shout, otherwise you're wiping, that kind of thing.
Honestly, I think the bolstering is twice as bad as it was before this 0.5 patch, because all the new power allowed people to basically pull twice as big as before. And now here comes the bolstering week on the third week of the patch, and it's oh, we can't do any of these pulls on bolstering week. We got to go back to the half-size pulls.
Right, but you're 3 key levels higher, so now that's a Depleto. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the issue for me is bolstering is just still imbalanced and unfun. It's it's a combination of both, right? Sometimes I don't think it's grossly imbalanced. It's probably half a key level harder or something like that than another affix. But the problem that I also have with it is just it just changes the texture of the dungeon so heavily.
Yeah, for sure. And this is even after the extremely good change of them removing the health gain from bolstering. It's still just the damage. And honestly, it's it's not even, it doesn't feel super hard on the tank if you're playing bear, at least. I'm sure for other tanks it's pretty noticeable still, but for the party, it's you get killed by anything.
I don't know. And you have Priest and Fire Mage being in the meta, so they're able to really dunk on a couple of very high priority mobs sometimes too. And it's
yeah,
it's still not always enough.
They nerfed Shadow Priest, but made it much better for bolstering week in the process as well. But
that did happen. Yeah,
yeah. It's I think unironically, Shadow Priest would choose for those changes to have happened going into this week, right? That was they are happy with those for the most part coming into, especially for a bolstering week. But even still, you're not seeing score go up in the explosive way that it did. So for instance, here's our graph of title score. Coming into 10.1.5, it jumped by more than 100 points in the first fortified week, which is also the first augmentation week. And then it jumped by 75 points on that Tyran week that was last week. So far, we're a little bit less than halfway through this week, and it's gone up by 7.1, which, to be fair, it looked flatter at the start of the last fort week as well, so it will probably go up by more than, it'll probably go up by 20-something this week, maybe, but...
Are we on the 3,500 title?
I think so. I mean, right, 3,500 is all 26s, right? That's something like that?
It's all 27s.
All 27s? Okay, wait, 3,500 is, okay, yeah, all 27s. Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible.
3,450 in NA at least.
3,450.
Maybe in
the good regions will go higher.
And the good regions.
It'll be 3,600.
Well, let's see. EU is currently 70 points ahead of NA.
70?
Taiwan's score is already 3506. It is currently 3506 in Taiwan. Good lord.
Our region fucking sucks. Maybe this is why we only have one team in the Great Push.
Maybe there's something going on here.
To be fair, EU does have double the amount of players, but yes, it's kind of embarrassing
That-
sometimes.
That's true, but the fact 70?
Yeah, that's rough. It's rough. We just focus on raid, right? Raid is now the new NA specialty. That's us. All right. But yeah, it's interesting because they've nerfed literally every single spec of Guardian, Holy Paladin, Augmentation, Shadow Priest, and Fire Mage. Do you guys want to take a look at the front page so far from this week with this week's affixes? You guys want to see how that is looking?
Yeah, let's see it.
All right, here's the damage. Let's see those nerfed specs. Oh, wow.
I'm shocked.
Wowee. There, oh my goodness gracious. There we have a brave off-meta Athlock filling in for a Fire Mage.
Warlock.
Yeah, that's cool. And then we have an Enhanced Shaman and a Blood Decay. So we've got a couple of brave heroes on our front page here, defying expectations and playing some other stuff. But it is crazy to me that over the past 2 weeks, all 5 of these specs have been nerfed, and they're all still this sick. I mean,
I think they need to. I think they need to like. Oh God, dude, it's so. The problem is like if you nerf them too much, then you like lock in the whole entire season's worth of keys. But this comp is so fucking broken, it is stupid.
yeah,
And it's not. And it's not like a normal level of stupid. It's like a wow, this thing needs to get completely. They need to take some serious nerf bats to some of these specs.
Well, it's such a huge problem too because it's halfway through the season, or like 2/3 maybe.
It happened
And
after the season.
they've
yes.
already let these specs exist for a couple weeks now as well. On top of that, so it's like people are already doing near the top level keys. Probably not quite the ceiling. There's still room to figure stuff out. But if this was like the beginning of the
100
season,
Yes.
and people were doing like 22s, like who cares? You can just nerf them, and then people will still figure out how to get to 26, 27 later. But yeah, it's a rough time right now.
Well, 100% of the top DPS in the top 100 are one of Mage, Aug Evoker, or Shadow Priest. The first person to not be one of those is an Elemental Shaman at 109.
that is crazy. Actually, that is a
that's
wild
nuts.
statistic. Yeah, so it's interesting as well because this season has moved to like all of those keys in that 26, 27 plus range now are being done with the like Giga Legion pull style, right? Like the way of just pulling like 3 or 4 packs all at once, right?
It's almost like MDI level pulls in Freehold. Like
Yeah,
you're
I mean-
pulling Freehold and something like 7 pulls on Tyrannical.
Nelth's Lair, you are pulling more than 30% this week, this fort week. I went and did a 28 Nelth's Lair. We wiped near the end, but at the start, we did the entire first pull on Fortified Bullstring, every single mob in the first area, zero practice, like 0 attempts at it, one shot that pull, no substantial risk, which is just, it's wild, right? Like it's, so how do you come back from that mid-season, or do you just let the season be a...
I mean, it's too late now, but like...
Well, but so the problem is there's only one tank that does that. There's only one comp that does that. So do you buff every other spec in the game to also be able to do that at this point? Do you nerf those specs so that they can't do that anymore and lock in the scores? I think one thing that, I mean, a lot of people have mentioned as a way to fix this would be to nerf that comp and then nerf the key level by like 2 or 3 key levels or something, so that
like
there's a compensation, like health and damage reduction across the board on M+. But
Yeah, I could see that maybe.
you would even still, like, would it be satisfying to be going into dungeons that you've been doing in 7 pulls and be doing them in 11 or 12, right? Like that is the kind of reverse progression. So can you put that genie back in the bottle?
So dumb.
I think probably not.
I think the answer, it's too late, right? Like that. I think to me, the answer is it's too late. Key inflation's already like too real with like what that comp can do, and it's like almost too late to go back. I think that the comp should have never, those specs individually should have not released at this strength. And then
Yeah.
and it's not just Aug Evoker. Obviously, Aug Evoker is fucking broken, but like it's not just Aug Evoker, but it's honestly also Mage should have never been left in the state that it was coming into this patch, and Holy Paladin should not have been buffed. Like there was no need to buff Holy Paladin. Guardian Druid, even though it was very minor change, did not need those. And Shadow Priest and the reliance on Mass Dispel should not have been a thing for this whole entire season. Now Shadow Priest, I think individually damage-wise is not like that insane, but Mass Dispel or Shadow Priest and Fortitude in particular also being just unbelievably strong. So Priest being required for the whole entire season, it should not have been like that either. Like, I think that they should have nerfed the reliance on Mass Dispel in these dungeons anyway, so you could have already gotten away from a Priest.
Yeah, for me as well. Like, as a like people, so you look at Bear being able to do the first pull of Nelth's Lair, and so should we buff every other tank to be able to not just do that pull, but easily do it on high fortified Bullstring? That's not good. Like, that is not good gameplay.
I would love that.
I like when my tank feels like stronger than it has on average over the past 3 years, but I don't think you should be able to have your healer jump down and start RP and finish a pull on fortified Bullstring without having to kite against that pull like that.
Well,
that
I like that.
of those tanks. I don't think, like,
everybody likes that.
You are past the point of it being like interesting and cool that you're surviving there. You're literally at this point where tank survivability is not in question at all, right? And you're just like a completely indestructible object. And I mean, obviously, like, that's, you know, it feels sweet. It's like eating ice cream for dinner, but you do it like that. I feel like that is not the power level that's like good. Like, I feel like that should be the kind of pull where it's like, oh my goodness, this tank is insane. They can live that pull with like perfect play. This player is so sick and they can do that, right? Like, sometimes Blood DK has that feel in some seasons where it's like, okay, this person I'm playing with is like nuts because they've figured out a way to live this pull. But with Bear, you just smash your face across the keyboard and you live that pull. It doesn't. There's no gameplay to it anymore.
Is it an issue? Okay, like, what if all the tanks are like that though?
I think that's bad. But if Bear is this strong, I think it's worse if all the other tanks can't do it, because then there's just 6 or 5 specs that can't play the game. So
but it's just an incredibly high outlier right now. Like, there's always some kind of tank like that in some fashion, but like now it's pretty substantially above the others. Like
this,
Blood
I
DK
think this
season
is
4
worse
of last
than,
expansion.
I think it's worse than Blood DK. I think it's worse than like Prot Warrior and BFA at the end of BFA. It's like it's so different.
I don't know about the Prot Warrior into BFA one. That one was that was fucking stupid.
That was
mostly because Spell Reflect also would like solo bosses and trash mobs and stuff like that.
Yeah, but you've got like Vigil, Wildfire, Innervate providing just like giga off healing value on Bear right now. I mean, it's different kind of value. I think Spell Reflect is probably better, but I don't know. I'm worried because basically, like, it seems like they can't leave it like it is and have that be a good choice, but they also can't change it and have that be a good choice. So I don't know what they're supposed to do, right? Like, I'm not sure what the move is for them.
I personally think they should just wait on any further nerfs to classes and only buff other classes, or just plan out some big nerfs for the end of the season, but not right now.
I don't think that they should be nerfing classes anymore. It should not have launched like this. This is dumb, but
I think they should nerf all 5 of these specs again. I think they're I just think it's rough when, you know, there's 40 specs in the game and 5 of them are the choices that you can push keys with, right?
I think it's too late though, right?
I think that it is 2.5 weeks into a patch that's going to last for probably 10 something like that weeks. Like,
okay,
it's the best time to fix this was 2 weeks ago, but I think it's better to do it now than not do it. I think they have to be careful to nerf in such a way that these specs are still good. And then I think they need to do a compensation nerf to dungeon difficulty as well, to make it so that the keys aren't just locked in. The best keys haven't been locked in these 3 weeks.
What if we go back to 10.1? What if we just pretend this patch didn't happen? Augmentation got removed and it's back in the lab up until 10.2?
Yeah,
that'd be pretty funny.
It's a shame because I think the 10.1 metagame was quite good. You know, if you
10.1 metagame was good.
Like, we can look back at a 10.1 week instead on the old IO page and see what the front page looks like.
It was mostly Priests, but then it was still things like Enhancement Shaman was really good. Rogue was still pretty solid. Balanced Druid was seen pretty regularly. You still had some people playing Mage. Like Warrior was pretty popular as well. Like, yeah, look at all of this.
All the
healers.
players.
Okay,
this was early season. This was fairly early. This is a fairly early season week I picked, I think.
I think the healers would have probably evolved into a lot more Holy Paladins.
Oh, this is even earlier.
But I do think that like a lot of the other healers were pretty viable. Like Resto Shaman and Preservoker were still pretty good. But I think the meta was shifting towards a bit more Holy Paladin centric.
Yeah.
But then it got buffed, and then it was just like, okay, well, this thing's
Which-
broken.
It's kind of normal that they can make a season where like a spec is 5% better than the next best option, and it takes us a few weeks or months to figure it out, and you sort of start seeing the meta converge over time. And to some extent, competitions like TGP, which happened this season and didn't happen in 10.1, accelerate that process, right?
Yeah.
But still, I think the fact that we were all on the broken comp within I think about 36 hours of this patch coming out goes to show just how much, like, we're talking about a comp that's like 50% better, not 5% better than other potentially compelling options. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it's a question as well of if you find this style of playing dungeons fun, because there is some merit to it. I personally much prefer a middle ground between this level of player power and, like, obviously, like, Shadowlands Season 1 is like a low point of player power where you're just running away from everything, and that sucks.
I hated
too.
that. I hated that.
But
Ugh,
I think there's like
that
a
was the
middle
worst.
ground where it's like playing like Shadowlands Season 2 Death Knight or something, where it's like or even playing DH in 10.1 and where it's kind of like I have strengths and I have weaknesses, right? Like, there's cool things I can do, and there's things that are hard for me to do, and challenges we're overcoming in these places.
You know what ticked me off the most? The fact that the whole entire season's worth of pushing was negated by the patch coming out.
So that's another interesting question. Should they make a season cutoff on a patch of this size? Like, should there be a season on the 10.1.5?
No, they shouldn't. They just shouldn't have let a comp do 3 key levels higher than people were doing, or 4 key levels higher than people were doing before.
Okay, because I mean, even if they only, because like there's always going to be, well, there's often going to be some power creep in the mid patches, right? Like, even stuff like Onyx Amulet and stuff. Most of the highest keys are done after those things are implemented. So should they create a partition at 10.1.5 and just hand out some titles for the 10.1 pushing, and then you've got a new playground and new pushing in the new season? I don't know.
I would rather them
I think they
do
maybe
that.
could. Yeah.
Then do like a full set of nerfs on like all the dungeon scaling and as well as the busted classes right now. I'd rather them just do a new season. But that would be
It's just
unprecedented,
weird.
right?
Charles sounds like
What is wrong with his voice?
yeah, it sounds like you've inhaled some helium. It's gone to like high. No, it's funny. It's not like it's like missing like the bass or something.
What? What is that real voice?
Okay, go again. Talk again. Test. Oh, he's probably on.
Okay, how about that?
Oh, that's,
Okay.
you're gonna have to
Dude,
listen
it's-
back to that later. It's really good.
It sounded like he inhaled helium. I was just sitting there like, why? I was like, what am I hearing?
So it's good now, right?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think your point is a good one as well. Though that's
I just don't like. I didn't mind last season the keys going up, half a key level to a full key level on the patch. I thought that was fine because it also felt like every comp benefited about the same. There were some comps that maybe benefited a little bit more, but most comps benefited about the same, and it wasn't as steep as 4 key levels or where I have to completely do every single key again.
Yeah, and it did change the best comp, and it did make it feel bad to be on the old best comp that was now nerfed. Right, like if you were playing
what, like
if you were playing like Prot Warrior, Prez Evoker, that kind of stuff, and then the nerfs, and then it was like, oh, I wish I'd been playing Prot Paladin, right? And like Resto Shaman or Priest or something, right? Like that was how it kind of ended. But you could still compete and play within a key level on anything pretty easily last season.
Yes,
and that was
I mean,
the
the crazy
crucial
part about
difference.
last season.
Yeah,
Last season's balance was so good. At the very end, a Disc Priest ended up number 1
yeah,
out of everything going
correct. And pretty uniformly, people did not believe that Disc was the best healer. But the balance was so close that a Disc Priest could have ended at number 1.
Yeah, this was I guess the top of the leaderboard at the end of last season. Obviously, like it's all Courts and Shadow and Burial Grounds, which to this season's credit, less of a problem this season. There's not as big of a dungeon outlier, so that was something we complained about a lot about last season that wasn't a problem this time. But yeah, like there's good stuff here, right? There's 4 healer classes on the front page. Only 1 warrior, and otherwise it's all paladins. But I got title on warrior, and it didn't feel like it was that bad. And then like 40 different DPS specs up here as well, which is sweet. Even got a hunter up there.
You get literally one of everything.
Yeah, you got this is great. Like this is really cool. And when the front page is this good, it means that when you're gonna go like a few thousand pages deep, it's just gonna be a full-on rainbow, which is insanely good. This time around, if you go like I've looked at like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 pages in, the density of the meta comp is still like over 50% on those runs, which is really rough, especially because when you consider like the pugging situation is going to be even worse than that. The pugs are going to be even more just looking for that class, and then the people that are, if you don't have like a group of friends that are going to play with you on your enhanced shaman or whatever, you're just not, it's not going to work out, which is
so just
brutal.
Just to kind of tie this all together, class adjustments didn't do anything. Maybe they should do something again. At the same point, like, this is tough. This is a tough meta.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I am least offended by actually is augmentation, because that's like launching a new spec in the middle of an expansion is cool, and that's like doing something like that. If that comes with if that like bricks or semi bricks an M+ season, I think that you can make a strong argument that that's a price worth paying. It's like if routine talent adjustments to Druid, Mage, Paladin are going to do this, though, that I feel like is a much worse trade-off than the coolness of like making a new spec. So
the thing I worry about at the end of whatever this ends up being is usually Blizzard overcompensates with nerfs after they do like a light pass like they did here. They didn't do enough in this case, which I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but typically the next step is like they nuke these specs into the ground. So hopefully it's not that bad and we don't end up in like a Shadowlands Season 1 meta like you're talking about, where tanks are just incredibly weak.
To their credit, they haven't been doing that in Dragonflight. Like, Warrior was really good at the start of Season 1, and they like small nerfed it 5 times instead of going like... I remember Blood DK 8.1, the incident, when they took that spec and they took half of its armor away. And, that they haven't done that at all this expansion, which has been, I think, encouraging.
I wouldn't hate if they did that to lizards.
That's true, yeah, lizards. Dude, have you guys seen some of the stuff that lizards are making possible in Raid as well? You guys know you can stack Amalgamation on Heroic now and just have your Scale Commander Warlocks delete them in 20 seconds.
Click this Twitter question that we had. I actually had a really good answer for this. Why the fuck?
Sorry, this isn't Twitter. This is a Zeet. I'm sorry.
Shut up.
You're gonna have to I think please use correct terminology.
I think that it is so stupid that the optimal number of Aug Evokers right now is either 4 or 0, and there's no in between because of how their buff stacking works with one another. I do not think that the specs should be able to be stacked like that. I think that you should be able to play it if you want to, but the optimal number being ever 0 or 4, and there being very little reason to ever do anything in between is so dumb.
They're just putting those in the same group with like 1 giga buffed player, right?
Yeah, that's we did a heroic like alt run, and we just had 2 targets, our dragon commanders, and 4 augmentation evokers that were just buffing them and going when they said they were going. And let me show you guys some logs. Here's a Amalgamation Chamber heroic with the bosses stacked, damage done, and let's take a look at augmented damage. Let's take a look at phase 1.
Oh
yeah, this is the 4 stack on these 2. You just push the boss out of phase 1 in 26 seconds. I wonder
it
if
seems like
this is going to work on
Mythic.
I think it's possible. Like, I think that this is possible to be the best thing to do on Mythic.
They gotta fix the spec. I think that the spec should not be able to be stacked. The optimal number being 4 or 0 is incredibly problematic for balancing of the spec.
2 is still good. 2 is better than 0. 1 is also better than 0.
Okay, I'm just talking about like optimal stacking, right? Like I'm talking about like optimal play here. I'm talking about like, if you're actually playing what you want to as opposed to like what you have available, the optimal number is either only ever going to be 4 or 0, and there's going to be no in between.
I could see there being a raid fight where you like, if there was mythic progression going on, I could see you just playing 1 or 2 with the current tuning and having that be correct.
Right now. The number right now, if the raid was released today, the number would be 4.
Well, that's true in a lot of like ideal cases.
Ideal, yes.
But like when you add the third augmentation evoker, the amount of like, and you're talking about like a real progression environment, like the chances that third, like there are diminishing returns beyond the first in real world progression cases where now your Ebonite might land on another lizard like that. If that's happening because the fight is hectic and things are like there, I could see a case where a Race World First Guild would only play 1 or 2 on Mythic Prog right now. But as it stands right now, in like a case where you actually can optimize it, yeah, like up until 4 is good, and then the 5th has the heavy diminishing returns because you can't target the same people as the first 4. But I don't know. I mean, like I think that augmentation being good for raid is cool, but I agree it's really tough to nerf this without it becoming like this is us using it where we're all in comms and we like have 2 Athlocks, which are the best target for it, that we're buffing, that we're syncing with their cooldowns, that we trust to press their cooldowns correctly. If you change that part of it, the augmentation evokers are a lot more reasonable, right? And
yeah, if you play with people who suck, yeah, I guess.
Yes, which most people do, right? Like most people do play with in a lot less optimized cases, right? Like most augmentation evokers are going to be executing their own rotation 80% correctly, and they're going to be targeting people who are executing their rotations 80% correctly.
Okay.
So it's like nuclear difficulty to make the spec not OP if the augmentation evoker is pressing their buttons 100% right, and their targets are pressing their buttons 100% right, and they're the right specs for it, without making it just god awful in the 80% case, because those numbers multiply together. True. It's I don't know how to fix it. I'm along for the ride. I can't wait to see the Race World First.
They changed logs to now appropriately show Aug evokers damage, and we were getting sold some fucking snake oil previously by thinking that the spec was bad. Like it was one of those things that I knew that there was something wrong. Like we were on some real tinfoil hat shit last week where we were like, oh, I think that there's something wrong with the spec's balance because it shows up like it's at replacement level DPS wise, but then you do a dungeon and it's like so much faster and you're so much safer. Better. Yeah, and now that they changed it to add a couple more things to the advanced combat logging, Aug evokers are pretty much topping damage meters in raid. They are topping damage meters in Mythic Plus. It's not by like a small amount. It's by like there's like a fucking plateau.
And there is still value that the evoker is providing that is not being accounted for in these logs is the thing. Like there's still more. They've got most of it, but there's still like any crit synergy that a spec has that is enhanced by having prescience crit. That's not being accounted for yet. Any time where augmentation evokers are playing their the CDR motes, which hasn't taken off yet, but I suspect might be something that gets experimented with and might be good, especially depending on how they nerf the spec in future. That's going to be impossible to ever show up in logs. Like it's the spec is so high value. Yeah, and not to mention blistering scales and the off healing, the shields, the black attunement. To some extent, like you could just be like, oh, they just have a better utility kit than everybody else. But like, yeah, they have a better utility kit than everybody else, and they're doing more damage.
And they have a cheat death.
Cheat death, yeah. Dude, well, I mean, you'll never be able to see like all the extra resources that healers and tanks and even DPS can spend on damage instead of living because there's an AUG in the group. Like you just can't see it on logs. Period.
That's like, would you ever hard cast a heal on yourself instead? But since the AUG is in the group, you're never gonna cast that. Like what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially on like, dude, an M+ when you're playing a Brewmaster or a Blood Decay and you just have like 3,000 extra armor, that feels really good. Like, you know, obviously, like if you're playing a tank and you're not playing a bear, you feel bad because you're not playing a bear right now. But if you only compared yourself to before you had an augmentation, like those effects feel really good with an augmentation.
Yeah, you still universally feel probably 2 key levels 3 stronger.
Yeah, I think we got to move on before this is a 2-hour podcast episode.
I think we got to be careful to not do this every week as well, because augmentation whining is.
It's going to be this broken for the rest of the patch. It'll be this broken for a while.
We're going to try. We'll try and avoid that unless they actually change it in future. But yeah, we'll leave that there. Okay, Neltharis chains. So Neltharis chains got nerfed to no longer deal damage to any mobs that didn't start in that chain area. So there are 3 types of mobs in Neltharis. There's mobs that can trigger and be hit by the chains, mobs that cannot trigger the chain but can be hit by the explosion effect, and mobs that cannot be hit by the explosion effect of the chains. And previously, all of the mobs in the dungeon were either in groups 1 or 2. This changed a bunch of mobs from group 2 to group 3 to mobs that just can't be hit by the explosion. There are still some mobs in group 2, like the mini boss that walks in that area. You can't actually hit him with the chain directly, but if he's near a mob that is the mob that's hit, he will take damage. Yeah.
I think that this doesn't change a lot for average high-end Mythic Plus
yes.
groups. Now, I think that this can change, maybe like half a key level to a full key level for average high-end Mythic Plus groups. I think this is actually probably a pretty big deal for TGP teams that were going to be snapping shit with Wernstone, and I think this change is almost zero for casual groups.
So, a lot of these mobs were killed with chains, even in non-Wernstone. Like, if we look at Sense's tweet here about how much damage came from the dungeon, this was done before, like, looking without Wernstone. Snaps was 42.8% of the dungeon was done by chains, and a lot of that is bringing over like thaumaturges, apex blaze wings, stuff into chain pulls. Like the high key strat involved 2 pulls full of type 3 mobs, or now type 3 mobs getting killed by chains.
I think that you can route around it though. Like, here's the thing: is like you can actually route around not pulling the thaumaturges into the first pull and instead doing a different adaptation of the first pull. In addition to that, okay, I think the biggest thing is you're gonna have to kill that blaze wing with your hands. But like that's the only mob that I see that you're going to actually have to play with your hands that you were not previously just chaining.
I found a VOD of an EU group doing a 28 yesterday on bolstering already, and they did it with like 4 minutes to spare. So like they're still able to do basically the same thing as last fort week. It's just a little bit harder, and they did have to route a little differently. Like instead of just chaining the bird as soon as they drop down, they spent all their offensive CDs on it and then chained the remaining wardens afterward.
I do think this is about a half a key level nerf, but at the end of the day, like it's going to allow you a lot less leeway for deaths. I think that people were doing this, like 8 minutes under some shit, and we're with like 15 deaths. I think that you're no longer going to be able to do that. I think you're going to actually lose a little bit of time if you mess something up and probably have to zone out the key.
And crucially, the Wernstone snapping 80% of the dungeon to the chains tech
that's gone.
That was brewing is gone.
I think that there was some real TGP shit cooking now with the Wernstone.
So there are a few different takes I've seen about this. One is like it's messed up to let TGP teams practice and like test this and then nerf it before the TGP. I think I'd be more sympathetic to this if it was within like a day or two of the weekend, and if Neltharis was in that weekend, which of course we don't know if Neltharis is in this weekend, but if it was, and if there was a hotfix on like Thursday,
well, I've forgotten.
That would be I think nastier, right? But I think doing it like on a weekly reset or something, like just fixing the game on a weekly reset, because this is a good change to make for the game, right? Like chains killing the whole dungeon is stupid.
They should stop designing dungeons like this.
Yeah, I agree with
that.
Well,
yeah, I mean that's the root of the issue, right? But I do feel like it's just bad timing again. Like most of the way through a season, you let this live the entire way. We reported it like week 2 probably, and they just didn't change until now. I think the timing is what people are upset about, even though it's really kind of a minor change in the end. It's just kind of annoying. I think they should have waited till the season was over and then just like done sweeping changes for this for 4 seasons from now when they bring Neltharis back.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that this change is worth, again, like I think they should nerf the god comp another time. I think they should fix Neltharis chains. The best time was 2 months ago, but now is better than not doing it IMO. But I don't think it's like I think it's pretty close. I don't know. I'm sympathetic to wanting to like not nerf the strat once people have learned it.
I mean, I think that this should have been nerfed months ago. Like
I think we all agree that the dungeon should not have released like this, but we disagree about what they should do about it now, right? And whether they should do changes like this.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's tough because we're 12 weeks into the season or some shit. 10
yeah,
weeks
I'm.
Side note, in terms of other changes that they did to dungeons this week, did you guys see the Brackenhide totem bug? Did you guys get to abuse that one?
No.
No, I did not exploit that dungeon.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Would you ever?
Dude,
I don't
JB
know,
had such a
depends
good
on the
tweet
mood.
about this actually. Sorry, Zeet about this. Let me see if I can find it. There's yeah.
There's a would you do it? Would you abuse a boss like this to make it not do mechanics?
That's a dangerous one. That's on the line of, is this going to be title removal like the Zenkiki quest thing was or not?
Did you guys see that? This was chat. The Brackenhide last boss exploit got fixed. Me. Good. You'll never see me abusing shit like that. Chat. Because it's cheating, right? Me. No, because we wipe on the first boss. As
Dude, I saw
Beautiful.
Yips.
That's a good one.
I saw
Beautiful.
Yips like a few hours after this was discovered, and they were in like a 29 Brackenhide, and Yips goes, "No, we're doing this shit legit." And they did it straight up. They did that dungeon straight up without abusing the Brackenhide bug. So for those who don't know, this is basically what was discovered. You were able to pull the boss. This has been fixed, but you're able to pull the boss through this area, and you had to specifically pull it through this area because if you pulled it out of the normal out of bounds area, it would reset the boss. And so you had to pull it up this wall, and then it would not spawn any totems or do any mechanics except for the frontal. And it was so dumb.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I think you were probably safe to abuse this without getting title banned, or banned. But I agree, it's
It's a
like
gamble,
closer than something.
sure.
It is a gamble. It's always a gamble in M+ when you see something like this. But
I think that stuff like this is definitely borderline.
I wish we lived in a world where it was consistently known that you would get punished for doing something like this, and therefore you didn't
Yeah.
have to like grapple with whether you should take the points or not. Now, to be fair, it was a week where you could. It was a good enough week, and the comp was good enough that you often got there the last boss with 6 minutes anyways, and you could have beacons on everybody and just do the boss straight up. But
Yeah, just have beacons on everybody on their new meta specs.
yep, that's
That's the hardest part about that dungeon, actually.
that is actually
Having 2 or 3 beacons.
Having 3+
Yeah.
beacons.
If you have 3 beacons, if you have Augmentation or HPAL tank, like you are big chillin'.
yeah. All right. Then there was TGP last weekend, which there was the Azure Vault to start the competition that generated some discussion, I would say, around places, which I actually thought I really enjoyed watching the Azure Vaults in terms of of the dungeon pool. I thought it was the coolest one in there actually for watching.
So just giving my opinion, I actually liked watching the Azure Vault. I was actually kind of sad that I couldn't go and then play Azure Vault after.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a bit
Yeah,
weird.
I think
That was a bit
that's-
weird to me because it's like a spectator thing. I was like, all right, I'm fine watching this, but then being like, oh, I'm not allowed to go play that. That felt a bit strange.
Yeah, one of the coolest parts about TGP compared to MDI is it's much more relatable to what you do in live keys. So them bringing a dungeon from another season is kind of like, oh, well, I'm looking for the tech that all these banger teams cooked up for, the live dungeons. I want to be able to use some of that tech in my own runs. And so that's the only downside, but it was still fun watching, the 31 Azure Vault.
Yeah.
Rerouting some of the dungeons, I guess first pull of Underrot is probably one that I'm really thinking of. First pull of Halls of Infusion, like how some of these TGP teams were routing through these dungeons, like doing that big assassin pull with the LOS spot and Vortex Pinnacle. Those are all like great strats, and I think that those are some of the things that I love. Those are parts that I love about the TGP, where it's like, oh wow, that's such cool tech. I'm glad that I'm able to implement this into my run.
I'm actually surprised they found tech in Azure Vault. I think they only had a week to practice it, right? And they found that tome in the frog area that you could rescue up to. I don't think a single person knew about that tome in season 1.
Yeah, that was sweet.
It was not even an MDI team that did it. It was FSY who did it first, right? I'm pretty sure they were the first team that did it, and then other teams started copying because they were like, "Wow, that's a great strat."
Yeah, that's a really good strat.
Yeah, I wonder if you're FSY, if you're ever supposed to save that till Sunday, and just do the dungeon slower at the lower key levels a little bit. I wonder. I wonder if we'll ever see a team because I know that Echo in the past has saved strats for Sunday and MDI, but it's a lot harder in TGP, especially if it might mean the difference between a 2-chest or not at one of the lower key levels.
Did FSY get griefed by mandatory sandbagging?
Yeah, a little. I mean, so what you're talking about is the fact that mandatory came into the weekend at a lower seed.
What was mandatory in this group?
But if you look at all of the other groups in the top 10 of the team leaderboards, they're all just killer. Like,
Yeah,
it's,
all three weekends are crazy.
we talked about this weekend on the cast of like, oh my goodness, this is like a group of death, but they're actually just all like every team in the top 15 seeds even is like you'll recognize the names. They're gamers. It's
Yeah, tons of good teams.
there's no easy groups.
I think every cup's going to be really entertaining to watch.
Dude, this weekend's group is absolutely insane. We got NA's Last Hope, which is the Dorky Drogo Goop, you know, that team. That team's gonna be absolutely insane. We have Legendary, which is the Lapan. Who else is on the team? Tobo, Wexy, that team. We have Last Moment, which is the El Broglio Enhancement Shaman team, which I don't know what they're gonna be doing with their composition. Like, are they going to adapt or whatever? You have Ready Check, which is the Roybin Shelley team, which again, very good team. You have Cool Beans, which is like who's on that team? Dr. J.
That's the
that
Dr.
Fem?
J team, right? Yeah.
Dr. J.
Fem,
Fem,
Dr.
yeah,
J.
yeah. And then you have Pixel, which is like the Lapan team, formerly named Nako. That
Not Lapan, right? Lapan's legendary.
not
right?
Lapan, Lamike.
Lamike, yeah.
Lamike,
Yeah, you had that's Pixel, which is the Lamike team, which was named Nako previously. All six of those teams are fucking crazy, and they all have TGP and MDI experience. Like,
Yeah, another nasty group. It's and only 2 of them get out, so I think it'll be pretty exciting. I wonder if we're gonna see any comp difference from this last weekend, because 3 of the specs in the comp were nerfed. So, you know, I don't think so though. I think it's
Probably not.
I think it's still gonna be these 5. Maybe in one. I don't know.
I've
I can't even think of a dungeon. Also, one thing I was thinking about was like playing Brew for like a 2 chest somewhere, but and one of the ways up, but they nerfed Brew. Like, that's actually a spec that got legitimately hurt by a nerf.
do you think they, if there's Brackenhide this weekend, do you think they would ever play Brew in there?
I don't think
I
so.
still think there's a chance you could play it in there.
Possibly, yeah. I think Bracken has the only dungeon where you ever consider that.
Brew's
But even then, it's like
Brew is
if you can get away
nasty for
without
the
it,
totems. It's really good at that. Like, that's
yeah.
that's really good for it. But I mean, Mark of the Wild is kind of insane if you're going high though.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
I think we won't see any brew, but it is certainly a small chance.
All right. I guess we're already 40 minutes something in here. We gotta get to our Brackenhide section so that so the Tettles can get to his raid only 30 minutes late. So let's get to our tip of the week segment. I forgot to think of a tip of the week, so I'll be thinking of one during you guys doing yours. Trell, what is your tip of the week?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So instead of Drivnos' first like weird tip, I'll do a weird tip this week. So when you're in a long movie, you know, like Barbenheimer, there's an app called Run Pee, and it'll tell you the best times to go take a pee break during a movie. It'll even give you like a voice line cue without spoilers. So you like wait for this voice line, and then you go do your bathroom break as fast as you can. And it has like the calculated least impactful time to miss during the movie. It's a great app.
Have you thought about just having a larger bladder?
Dude, it's a 3-hour movie.
Have you thought about just
Although,
having a
to be
larger
fair,
bladder?
I did make it through all of Oppenheimer without going, so feeling good about that.
That is good tech.
I'm happy for you.
That's really good tech. All right. Tettles, what is your clip of the week about?
Okay, I had a question. Okay, so look at it, mandatory in the top right. Look at what they're doing here. Do you like this strat? So a lot of teams play the Frog Gauntlet, but instead in Halls of Infusion, but instead mandatory was actually going to this left side and was mass pulling this whole entire area with their lust. I whenever I saw this live, I couldn't tell if this was good or bad. So I did some mapping on the time, and it seemed like
I love this.
It seemed like they were a little bit faster than one of the other teams, but very similar to FSY time-wise. Both of those teams did the right side, but it's also Sanguine.
Friend of the show, Karasis, actually mapped out like all the team strats in this segment of the dungeon, and Mandatory's left side strat was actually on par with the top time. So it was actually maybe even slightly faster to do this cleanly than going the right side Frog Gauntlet. And the right side's obviously a lot more risky, especially on something like Raging too. And so I really like that this strat's pretty viable, personally.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend going left and going slower for less coordinated groups as well. Like, just do that area in like 2 pulls instead of 1, and much easier than going right in that frog room. So In TGP, yeah, I mean, it seems good. It requires very precise sanguine management at the end, but I like it. I think it's cool. It's more count as well, right? Is it? Or is it the same?
It's if you skip the shock casters, what are they called? Shock troopers at the very start, like mandatory did, then it's about the same count.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's yeah. I don't know. I thought it was really weird that they did this. It's probably safer, right?
It's 100% safer. Yeah, you skip shockcasters entirely until the 5-pack that's right before the mini bosses, and you don't have 18 frogs. I think you only have like 8 total.
Okay.
All right, it's time for my tip of the week. My tip of the week is if you're looking for a fun mobile game to play, but you don't like mobile games, ones like if you want to just pay some money, like a couple bucks, and get a game and not one with like microtransactions or one with just like expansion packs, there's a game that's sort of like Slay the Spire. You can get Slay the Spire on your phone, first of all, if you like that game, and you should. But there's a game called Dawncaster that I've been playing that's a similar sort of vibe. Pretty good, like airplane game. No Wi-Fi needed. You know, legitimate quality game on the phone instead of like a mobile game, which I hate like energy game. Any game that has like that kind of stuff going on. So that's my tip of the week.
When did we get a sponsor for the show, Trell?
Well, he did run.
This is a good one though.
I'm doing an app as well.
When did we get a sponsor?
Yeah, we're doing iPhone apps right now.
These are organic, you know. But also, if there are any apps out there that want to sponsor us, you know, we're always listening.
Feel free.
Yeah,
that's true.
You know, I could have really used this app. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Toronto right now, and I didn't have service for a little bit, and I did not have a good iPhone game without service. So that would. That's
the thing. I'm always trying to make sure that I avoid that situation. Or you bring your Switch if you can. You just bring your Switch, and that's, you know, that gives you a bunch of games like that, which is obviously better. But you can't always have your Switch. You know, you don't always want to bring something so bulky. So
hashtag ad.
You know, hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag ad.
All right, let's move on to Brackenhide Hollow, which is one of the dungeons we haven't done yet. One of the few dungeons we haven't done yet. So we've got, I think, 4 more. I think we're at like the halfway point now.
Yeah.
And starts off with the cage opening area, which has a couple of different variations. There's sort of a few cages that are always gotten, like the ones kind of along that left beach or right beach. Almost always get picked up, but whether or not you get that first cage on the left when you walk in or skip that, whether or not you send somebody on a mission to get that one kind of in the middle of their area, whether or not you do like the priest mind soothe trick to get that last one at the back, are all pretty interesting things about it, because there's actually a lot of stuff that with a shadow priest you can mind soothe and like skip in the first area if you want to, but there's also a lot of pretty good count in there now.
You can walk up to any cage in the first area with Fade and Mind Soothe. I'm pretty sure every single one, and just grab it without pulling anything.
That is correct. With Fade and Mind Soothe, you can actually grab every single one. So I think that there's a world where you actually just route that dungeon where you do like on Tyran some weeks you could actually just do like the first pull of the dungeon, send your priest to go and do all of the cages. You do the second pull that's like in front of the first boss, and then you put your lust on CD on the first boss, and then you back pull all the trash that you want.
Yeah, because you do want to get count in this area, right? You do want to.
This area is pretty good count. I think that this area is not bad efficiency wise, mob count wise.
Well, I would say that with the current meta, at least, it definitely depends on your group. But I think that the second area and the last area are actually the most efficient. The first area can be pretty challenging as soon as you introduce what are they called? These DK speakers and more than one mystic into a pull. It's extremely challenging.
I think the first area in general, because a lot of the times you are limited on how large you can pull based off your interrupts, and having like 2 mystics and a decay speaker in your pull is probably the cap.
Yeah, I mean you do want to pull something there though, because since you don't get the extra, like you get what 60%. You could get 60% count if you pull like the whole rotwood, right? But then you know you're skipping everything between Treemouth and Gutshot usually, right?
Terrell, I have a question. Show's been begging me to pull Fish Face. Is anybody
What's the Fish Face lore?
The fish face is like super far on the left in the first area. He's
He-
worth a lot of count for sure, and you can
He-
outplay all of his stuff.
Yep.
Huh.
But he's surrounded by like 10,000 casters, and there's like no cages over there, so it's pretty awkward to spend the travel time, one, and two, just like make a good pull in general up there.
Yeah, getting over to him kind of sucks, and then you have to get back at some point.
30 count though. That's pretty good. That's
Maybe.
that's
What
quite
if
a
I
lot.
went and tagged him and drug
Yeah.
him like across? Like, what if I went and tagged him right while the group was doing the first pull, and then like dragged him
swam back?
across? Yeah, swam back.
Oh yeah, tag him from the side so he doesn't social stuff as he comes at you, and you're in aquatic form.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Yeah. All right. That's a good cook. That's cool.
I don't know. I don't know. We haven't seen that mob ever get pulled, but Show is on one with that mob.
We'll have to see what teams in TGP do, but I personally think that minimal pulling in the first area is good, because
Really?
to make up like 30% count in the first area, you got to do like 4 or 5 pulls generally. Where in the second area, you can do that in 2 pulls easily.
I just don't like the wilted oaks. I think the oaks are so inefficient time wise, especially on like fortified.
Yeah, I was on the same train. I know a lot of people don't like the oaks either. I think that the double oak one is that pull is probably the worst one, but I think 1 oak these days is not too bad.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I guess it. Maybe it's because I'm playing a Moonkin. It's just like, oh god, this mod fucking sucks. Maybe if I was playing a mage and could bust it or something.
Yeah, I've been oak gaming. Like I've been getting a lot of count in that second area usually, and it's
Okay.
I think it's okay. I mean, I guess I'm a bear, so I don't care about anything. It's just a question of whether
Yeah,
or not my
those
group
pulls are like-
complains out loud or internally, whether I'll know. Yeah.
Those pulls for bear are just like easy 20% pulls. You just pull the entire room.
You're just there, you press thrash, you've got thrash on 7 targets. Now you can press iron for whatever you want. And then you can, you get 6 seconds or whatever to AFK after pressing iron for a couple times. Have a nice drink,
Yep.
you know?
You get your
Sit
defensive
back.
funnel from all the targets.
Yeah,
It's great.
it is crazy how I think. Side note: I think the way to nerf Guardian is to like target cap how many targets you can be gaining rage from Thrash. I think that should probably be capped at like 5 or something.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How about the first boss? The first boss, I've seen a lot of people interact with the first boss of Brackenhide briefly and then go to a different dungeon. So I think this is probably one of the pug killerest bosses out there. Even post nerf, I would say it's still pretty tricky.
There's a lot of tricky parts about this fight. Yeah, I think the biggest pug killer is the Gash Frenzy. I think it's what it's called, right? Where he teleports to people and gives them a grievous.
Oh,
bleed.
yeah.
That will insta kill players if they don't cast something on pull to survive it. And then second is usually casts from the Totem Speaker boss, and people have generally decided to kill that boss first these days. We used to kill the bleed boss, but now with power levels being a little bit better, I think we all just kill the caster first.
Trick totem or whatever. Yeah.
Trick totem. Yeah, trick totem. So if you don't get good kicks at the right time on that boss, especially while Gash Frenzy or the Marked for Butchery goes out, then somebody will probably die. And then the third pug killer is like the tank healer PvP combo. If you don't get your healer out of CC in time, and then the tank gets hit by a storming tornado or something and misses the soak on the charge, somebody might die at that moment. But then after that, if you can survive all those, the boss is good.
I think that in general, I like to let if you have a spammable purge in your group, which this could be any spammable purge, doesn't really matter. I actually like to let the heal cast from Trick Totem go off, and we always have that be purged, and then we rotate kicks through on the casts on Trick Totem, because the bolt that it does actually does a significant amount of damage.
Yeah, definitely let the heal cast go. Just purge it.
I also think that like you always look to use a personal on whenever the grievous is getting applied to you, and then you utilize things such as like sack or whatever else if you're ever getting fixated by the frenzy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, definitely use your defenses on Gash Frenzy and get externals for Mark. I think there's so many mechanics going on this boss. There's also a frontal cleave every time the big melee guy attacks the tank. You gotta watch out for that too.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Oh
There's
yeah.
way too many mechanics.
Gotta be careful. Yeah. Gotta not aim that at people as the tank.
Dude, I didn't know
Tanks looking to learn. Tanks looking to learn this boss also need to do big, long movements every time you kick the caster during the one guy's blade storm, because like one tick of blade storm will kill a melee or a healer player trying to get their kick. And you want to be able to cleave more efficiently too. But once you master this boss, once you get all 50,000 mechanics, you can also pull the pack that's right before the boss in once the caster dies for some easy count too.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Yeah. All right. So after that boss, you can either go left or go right. We have a question from Theod in Discord that says, do you
You can
think it's a
only go
problem
right.
that nobody ever goes left after the first boss, or is the variety between a few different routes enough that it's not something they need to fix?
Charlie, have you ever gone left?
I think once, like on Mythic Zero, yeah,
I always did on M0, yeah.
6 months ago.
I liked that route in M0, but it's like it's a much more annoying end of dungeon as well to go from Treemouth up than it is to go from Gutshot up, which is another part of the problem.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know. I do think it's a problem. I think they should nerf the left side until it's competitive. And like I think a lot of that would also be nerfing the right side after Treemouth to end a boss.
What is even over here? Hunter.
I really wish they would have tuned those mobs at some point.
They
because,
have. They've nerfed the random
hunters
shooters a
are
little
over
bit, but
here.
it's just not enough.
Well, it's the stalkers that are the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
The stalkers
Yeah.
do like a group wide bleed, and I think there's like a double stalker pull that you have to do, and like that pull is just insanely banned. But if they ever nerfed that into the ground like they should have a long time ago, then you could have done like skip the entire first section basically with just mind soothes, and then done like all of your count in the second area going both sides or something. That would have been really cool.
Well, dude, there's also infinite hunters in this area, which you think the stalker is the problem. The hunter, like you can only
Yeah,
pull so
those
many
two.
hunters at once before you die. Like
They
that
definitely
mob
nerfed one of
does
those
suck.
mobs, but I don't think it was by enough to be competitive, which yeah, okay, so
There's also rogue mobs that just destroy your tank with haste debuffs. Oh, that's the worst.
so let's assume we're going right then. The right area is actually pretty chill. A lot of it's just like a lot of mobs. You've got rot hexers, so you really want somebody to cleanse a cauldron, give everybody one of those self dispel extra action buttons, and then you just focus rot hexers if they're in pulls. What do you guys think about swapping to totems? Is that something you'll ever do, or
No, absolutely
Nah.
not. So there's two things I'm going to do with totem. I'm either going to outrange it at 30 yards, or alternatively, I'm just going to camp on top of the cauldron. Both are pretty valuable. The cauldron has no maximum cap. It has no charges. It only goes on like a 10-second cooldown. You just slam those suckers on CD and you outrange the totems. I would be even down to pull 2 rot hexers. I'm never killing the totems though.
Yeah, like the meta route is kind of just pull 1 rot hexer and it's near a cauldron, which is one of the big reasons why it's done that way. So you pull the rot hexer, you drop the first totem 30 yards from the cauldron, you move the whole pull back to the cauldron, and then you don't even have to dispel once until like halfway through, and then you just self dispel every 10 seconds on cooldown. We call it getting a juice box if somebody has 25 alchemy to open the cauldron, and it's pretty free. Like all you do is kick the rot singer, you ignore the totem, and just fight the rest of the pack.
all right? How about going into caves to get extra count here? Is this something that you include in any routes?
So it like those caves have a lot of like mystics and shapers, right? That's what the caves have.
Yeah.
They also have decaying
Yeah.
slimes.
There's a hunter in that first cave too.
Oh,
Okay.
bonus hunter.
I'm not a fan of
not
that
a
pull.
fan. Yeah.
Some people are though. I think 1 hunter is generally okay. Like people do that in the very first pull of the dungeon too. If you have something like Evoker, Holy Paladin to take bleeds off people, because that's the problem with those.
What do you think, Dreadness? Do you like doing those in your runs?
No, I usually prefer to get my count elsewhere rather than go in there.
I feel like there's better opportunities to get count other places, right? Like I think the first area is. I'm a bit more comfortable with the first area. Maybe I would like the cave diving stuff. It was, I don't know. Maybe there's something with lust you can do on Tyran weeks on the first boss too.
All right. How about Treemouth? So Treemouth, I think the main thing is just a rotation of who goes in, which is usually like right now with the comp, it's like bear, pala, bear, something.
What if you just used a
yeah,
Wordstone, bro?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can use Wernstones
Wernstone.
too.
That's true. Wernstone hack is big.
Somebody can go in and then use the Wernstone from their bags to just port them out,
Yeah.
Yep.
and
It's
it
so
just it
stupid.
acts like an immunity. So when a paladin does that with Divine Shield, they press Divine Shield after they get eaten, and it just ends the consume right away.
And removes the whole shield as well, which is
Does
big time save.
if you use the Wordstone while inside the stomach, do you get a stack of the debuff still?
I'm pretty sure it just ends it entirely. So no, You can even precast it right before you get eaten, so where it finishes right after, and you take no damage and just get ported out. It's very good.
All right, so after Tree Mouth, we have Stink Breath, which I think skipping Stink Breath is a important part of a balanced breakfast. A lot of teams will also use this opportunity to hearth somebody out and swap to a last boss, or at least this has been done, like mages swapping to Frost for the rest of the dungeon from here, because the graveyard gets updated, and this is like the only time the graveyard gets updated. How do you guys like skipping Stink Breath, and would you advise ever pulling that monster?
I think people doing their weekly 20s are just looking to like get their portals. Just pull him. It's really not that hard until like 23, 24 when he starts to one shot with his Fernal. But otherwise you want to skip him. You might soothe him and then find some way to jump around him or blink past him or just walk past him if you have Fade, if you're a priest.
And then you've got Grips and Rescues, Wernstone if you've talented it for the boss. Maybe it's back off cooldown, although I think it's on a pretty long cooldown, so if you use it on the boss, I don't think you can use it for this. Okay, you also have to watch out for the invisible mobs as well. Once you get across that bridge, there are some invisible mobs over on the left, which we got asked, how do you make your party not aggro those? And then somebody helpfully answered, hug right. That is the best way to do it, right? You hug right, and then you walk up and around the little, and over this like tree path.
Click the
right.
Trelvod, and we can kind of talk about like where they are and like how to skip them after you do Stink Breath. So those mobs patrol, right? I think that's the big thing, is that they like patrol forward.
They don't actually. People think they do,
stationary.
but they're stationary. Yeah.
Oh, really?
They're just like a little close to the left side of the bridge, so you just never touch that left side. You go right where I go here in this clip, if you're watching.
Yeah, you can also mind soothe them while they're invisible too, to where you're never gonna pull them if you mind soothe them.
Yeah, you can also mind soothe. In this clip, I'm also carrying the H-Pal to make sure that they have a way to get across safely. Since I'm a druid, I can just wild charge jump across the bridge. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's just a lot faster to carry somebody who can't like immediately like skip Stink Breath like that, because otherwise they're gonna have to wait and they're gonna have to jump with their mount. And jumping on your mount is a lot sketchier than, utilizing something else, like Fade and walking by or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, the bear plus the 2 vultures is another common pull. What do you think about pulling this into Gutshot? Is that something you would do on...
Oh, yeah, 100%. Okay. Yep. The only time it's ever hard is on Sanguine.
Yeah. Gutshot itself, surprisingly, the hyenas, I think, are some of the few things in the game that are still, like, scary physical surprise damage even to bears, if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So you got to look out for these things. Yeah.
And they fervent too. So I mean, most people probably know fervents if you're a listener, but that's like a tank hit that hits the nearest player if the tank's out of range whatsoever. They fervent very easily. So if anyone ever gets one of those bleeds, they're toast if they don't have an immunity.
Yeah. Got to be really careful of those. Just make good use of the traps. Like knock them into traps if you need to, if they're ever in a rough spot, and you can tank them here like Charles doing, but yeah, there you go, you knocked them into a trap, and then you just keep them controlled like that and get them cleaved down near the boss, kick the boss.
So the hyenas you shouldn't be hitting the hyenas here, really.
They take damage from the traps, right? Yeah,
they die to the traps.
2 traps kills a hyena.
But you should so this boss is either really easy or really hard, basically, and it becomes really hard when the hyenas split up at all. So if they're ever not stacked and they're consuming double the amount of traps, it gets pretty scary fast, because you need the traps to be like doubling up and killing the hyenas. If you get behind, I forgot that happened. I almost got knocked off there. Luckily, I had wild charge.
That's good.
But if you ever get behind, you do need to target down these hyenas because they can get out of hand.
The hyenas, whenever they're trapped, they work like classic mobs too, where they just melee the close, or they'll like bite the closest target. Yeah. So if you're playing any melee or a holy paladin or anything, you stay the hell away from those mobs.
Yeah, I think that's the big rule of thumb, is just give those hyenas infinite respect on this fight and get them into the traps, and then they will die.
Dude,
I totally forgot about that.
I can't believe you almost got knocked off the edge,
dude. The worst is when you get knocked by like a storming tornado and you're already high up in the air, and then you get like a mandatory tank knock mechanic on you, and you just go soaring across the dungeon. That happens in Neltharis on the blacksmith boss too. Oh my god,
dude, I love it whenever the blacksmith. Have you ever had it cancel? Like I've had it get canceled and just get launched like straight into the middle. because then it just wiped us because of
Yeah.
Storm Tornado.
So stupid.
It's scary.
I did have a Neltzer last week where I got knocked twice and didn't get hit by landslides because I was high enough up that it was like back-to-back ones as well, so it looked intentional, but it was just complete accident. But yeah, it's really funny storming interaction. Usually just really annoying whenever it happens.
It is almost always really annoying.
Okay, so Gutshot goes down,
Yeah.
then we have this big pull that you do after this, grabbing a couple of Rot Hexers in.
Yeah, it's good to have a prio target in this pull.
Yeah.
This pull's very scary for melee. HPAL makes it much easier because they can just eat a lot of these bites that they do on melee players for free with the Shield of the Righteous and the Million Armor. But if you don't have an HPAL, you got to be really careful about that. And you need to make sure that you only pull the amount of Rot Hexers that you have dispels in the group, unless you have a Cauldron nearby. But I think I accidentally pulled 3 here, and so we were in danger.
Yeah, because if the Withering Contagion doesn't get dispelled, then they cast that like consume decay thing or whatever that just kills the people that have it, right?
Yeah, it's a Siphon Decay.
Yeah,
So
Siphon
you got to
Decay.
make sure that people get their debuff slot before Siphon Decay goes out. And otherwise, these Rot Hexers don't do anything if you do that right. They're a very, very good count.
Yeah. Okay. And then kind of some similar pulls like that. We get to the last boss that now that you can't cheat is I think a pretty hard boss. Pretty hard boss in context of the expansion as a whole, you know? A lot of danger from the
I'd say
totems.
it's the hardest or, maybe second hardest boss this season.
Yeah, so what is the, I guess, strat for Decatriarch, Rathai?
Oh, man.
Think about the arena.
Besides that, if you have to do it straight up.
There's a lot of different theories. Even with a single comp, you could probably do this a bunch of different ways. It definitely depends on your comp for sure. So you got to know like the damage profile of everyone in your group. For something designed like this, you got to know when they have their damage, how well they can execute their damage to allocate stuff like Beacon from the Beyond on certain totems to kind of save some damage requirement on them. On top of that, if you're a tank or healer, you got to worry about the tank debuff quite a bit. You got to worry about the boss position quite a bit. But as far as like strat for killing the totems, it's kind of like a lot of classes have damage for every odd or even totem, and then you kind of build the strat from there. If you lust, I think an odd number totem, maybe it's like an even number totem. If you lust like the second or third or fourth, then it'll carry across into an odd number totem as well. So you can kind of play around that. But you really have to design a strategy based on your comp if you're doing this in the high key.
Yeah, I think knowing, like, basically if you're in a high key, the totem getting a cast off, even the first one getting its cast off of each cycle as well is really bad. It's not like, but it's not a wipe. Whereas if the second one gets its cast off, like, it's so nasty. You need to use so many defensives to live it, but because it lines up with the boss's cast, right?
What I will say is making sure that like your Augmentation Evoker and your healer, these are the two primary people that need to know when totems are going to be going off. And making sure that if you're going to get a totem that is exploding after this AoE, like you have like, the Evoker pops his Rally, or you pop your Zephyr, you pop like multiple of these in conjunction with one another, like slam Zephyr plus the Scales charge, and then that's going to make your group able to take the upfront damage from the AoE plus the totem damage.
Yeah, just so nasty because then you've got this dot that is doing a lot of damage and reducing your group's damage for the rest of the phase, right? And so you kind of fall behind and stay behind like this, right?
This dot going out essentially means your healer can't do damage to the next totem,
right?
As well.
And everybody in your group is doing way less damage. So yeah, it's a common story, and the beacons are huge for it. Beacon to the Beyond is like that's the secret sauce to doing this easily, is having 3 of those and just using those when you're light on stuff. Communicating with people, maybe desyncing some cooldowns so that somebody always has something for every totem. And then, yeah, if you do have to have one go off, you try and use defensives for it and live it, but you recognize that you really need to make sure the next one dies or else you're going to fall behind forever, right? And that sucks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really important for tank players that might not know this to do some pretty exact movement throughout the fight so that you always make the totem spawn opposite side of the cloud that's moving around the room. Basically, there's like a spot that's in the very middle of the boss room, and if you're trying to spawn a totem in a certain spot, you just need to be opposite through that middle point in the boss room so that it spawns in a point directly across from you, if that makes sense.
All right. That is Brackenhide Hollow. Anything we missed? Anything you guys wanted to add about this dungeon that we didn't get to? Any questions in chat? Anything obvious that we
I think this dungeon's pretty easy relative to like the amount of damage that you need to output in the dungeon, depending on the like relative to the timer. I think the biggest thing is like making sure that you're playing for the end boss.
I agree.
All right. Let's move on to our favorite bit of the show, thanking our supporters over on the Patreon and seeing what wacky names they've come up with for us this week. This week, we have a big thanks to go to support specs or raid buffs with skill expression. Thanks to the 10.1.5 class changes, we were able to defeat Mythic Rashok and Zaskarn. Never Nude, Ja, King of Skills, Dranos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Chewy. Augmentation evokers bring the chaos we need in WoW. Okay, back to playing the Holy Paladin. Salty Zenny, ZivXX, Necris, Tankdill, Nevuk, Eevee, Year of the Spear has extended into 2023, bless up. No Trick, I forgot I was subbed here. Dymat, Rework Mistweaver, taking suggestions for what class to bring to alt raids. I'm already my team's Augmentation evoker. I will, in my guild, the mirror disease has been spreading. Like, a couple of the new people we recruited have mirror alts, and I hate it.
It depends. Like, it really depends on like how you enjoy playing the game. I think that Spreece is pretty fun right now. I think Spreece is pretty fun. I don't know,
Spreece is cool. If you like, Power Infusion is the closest thing to Augmentation
That's true.
any of the other specs have, so. Nyx, Lurka, have you ever tried Korean fried chicken? Gallic, Brusif, Dratner Abyss, feels okay, man. M-Sanity, Xena, Rogue's now good enough for Prog, but still bad enough to be sat for SLG, bless up. Red Color,
Bless up.
YouTube.com/Workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Nevermore. Number 1, Sibsky Frachelski. Lurka is leaving the East Coast for the West Coast. Does anyone have any recommendations for fried chicken over there? The Thunder from Down Under needs his chicken fix.
Okay, so I think that's what the Korean fried
Yeah,
chicken
it's
is,
unfortunate sequencing there that the one was above the other because they were probably talking in the channel. Yeah, I see what happened here. Milk, Sife, Pone, Windwalker monks deal with nerfs by rolling with the punches. Thesaurus.com is a powerful tool. The Marshare, Mage Rework Waiting Room. Thank you for listening to the Titanforge podcast, as brought to you by Daddy Dratty, Grampy Trelsky, and the Tettles Effect. Big Head Small Brain, King's Honor Fellow Horde, it's me, your newest guild member. Juniper, Demo Lock goes burr. Dorky Guide for Vengeance CH is a vibe. Time to re-roll back from DPS again. Rat Run, Jatto and Honey Chunk forever. Chauncey, that moment when your tank says, now where's my ranged at during Jade Serpent Dragon Boss and bricks your key. Feral Druids in the MDI, you've got to be kidding me. Oh, you don't have that yet? Boom. Sire Dematicus solemnly swears he is up to no good. The small mammal living in Dratnos' shirt. Sapphire, Pogmentation evoker buffs make me feel like a real man. Rework DKs, please, Blizzard. I will buy you a Happy Meal. And is it me or is Tettles a real-life Fry from Futurama? Good question.
How have you been liking? Does DK need a rework?
Blood DK? Or just DK?
I don't know.
DK?
I don't think so. In my opinion, I haven't played a ton of DK lately, although I might be playing on Holy next year for Raid. But
Ooh.
I like Current Blood. I wish it was a little bit better compared to other tanks, but I like it.
Yeah.
Or what about Unholy and Frost?
I have no idea. Well, so I've been playing Unholy for like 24 hours because I just got told I might be playing it. So it was very interesting to me to see that they have one talent build for every single boss and basically
Like a
the same
different
talent.
No.
No,
The same.
Oh,
one
one
talent
build.
build period.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's kind of crazy because it's like, they're a single target specialist, but even with some bosses with some minor cleave, they still play the exact same build, which is like no Epidemic, no Unholy Blight. It's kind of interesting.
I think it's weird how that spec has like either it does full single target damage or it does infinite damage to like 30 plus mobs and there's no in between.
Yep. I don't know. I feel like Blizzard might see them performing so well because of Augmentation and nerf them maybe too hard as well. I really am interested to see what happens with DK.
All right, our first non-Tettles question comes from Donut, who asks, should Blizzard shorten the affix rotation and remove more affixes without adding replacements? Looking at you, Sanguine, Afflicted, Incorporeal, etc. So the affix rotation has already gotten shortened to 10 weeks from 12. Should it go even shorter, and should they just take affixes out without putting new ones in?
I'm okay with the 10, honestly.
yeah, I
'Cause
think
'cause
10
we
is
see
good,
every
like-
affix twice.
I have gripes with specific affixes still, but I don't think that I would prefer a shorter season in terms of number
Yeah.
of weeks. Charles, what do you think?
I think like a shorter rotation is generally good.
Okay.
I think the affixes are in a better spot than they have been for a long time. Like they continue to get a little bit more balanced here and there. But I think that like when you miss the 1 week and then you have to wait 12 weeks for the next time it rolls around, it's pretty, disconnected from reality. It's like, oh, I didn't get to play my competitive game for this 1 week. Now I get to miss out on all the good score to happen. That's not a good feeling.
I will say, not looking at it from like a push week perspective, but looking at it in terms of a diversity perspective, I actually do prefer that it's 10 weeks as opposed to, I prefer that it's 10 weeks. I think that if it got, I guess the next step down would be like, what, 8? And they remove 2 affixes. I think that then you start to maybe run into issues where it's like the weeks don't feel that differentiated. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I think there's
it could
always
still
enough
work.
variety.
Yeah, I
think 10's okay. I don't think
Yeah. I guess I don't feel that strongly about 10 over 8. I think if it gets much less than 8, then I think it starts to feel too, like, oh, we just had this week and it's back again, maybe. But I think 8 maybe would work. Yeah, if there's affixes that need to get
I'd be down
cut.
for 8, yeah.
Yeah. All right, next question comes from Sigurd, who asks, best ways to find pre-made M+ teams so done with pugs, so not playing at the moment. Well, I will say this is the hard part all the way up. This never stops being the hard part, I don't think.
I think you're not going to like to hear this, but the best way to find a good pre-made is to pug.
For what? Yeah, I mean, like, ultimately that's where you find the people, right? And then it's like pugging and then like aggressive networking. And it is made much easier the better of a player you are. Like your friend requests, your hey, you want to play messages, those things, success rates scale with how good you are. So improving as a player is like always a big it's like a sleeper huge buff to those things working. It's not
100%.
It's not just like it's not just add everybody that's good at the end of each dungeon. It's be good enough that they want to add you back and key with you, which at least there's some agency there, but obviously it's like there's still like pugging to do to get there. All right, next question comes from Stormbreed that asks, at Tettles, can you ask the panel if you overall blame Max and Scripe for the increased need for weak auras in raiding?
No, I do not blame Max nor Scripe for the increased need of weak auras for raiding. I think that maybe contrary to popular belief, they've always been necessary.
Yeah.
Without them, I mean, somebody would stream some way of doing something and everyone would pick it up instantly because of the flow of information and how it works these days. Like, no matter what, we'd be in this world where we are now with
I think you can replace Max and Scripe with literally anybody. And
yeah, I mean, I think there's always a... Like, you see this not just in WoW, and also not just with weak auras, but there's a lot of times where, like, the Trailblazers kind of get blamed for opening these, for like the arms race and for revealing what is good, and there's kind of this wish of like, what if just nobody had ever done that and we all were playing bosses without weak auras still, with less weak auras. But I don't know, I mean, like, the most egregious weak aura may still be the Archimon radar weak aura, which was before Max or Scripe were Race to World first playing, right? Like, I don't know, just in general, I just don't like trying to or assigning any blame to the people at the head of the pack or whatever for that. I feel like you can look at it and be like, oh yeah, we didn't know back then, but now we do. But the solution is then like structural. The solution is not to just like shame people out of doing Race to World first or whatever and be like, you guys are ruining the game, you got to stop that. The solution is, well, we got to come up with a new way for weak auras and the game to like coexist. If there are going to be such professional weak auras existing so early on, which again, I also agree with Tettles, was more of a thing than you probably are remembering going back further.
I mean, how long? Give me the number of years that weak auras have been required for you guys to raid.
It is longer than there has been a televised Race to World first, for sure. Again, the Archimon one, I think, is a very good example of this.
Probably like 6 or 7, maybe.
For me, it's been like 6 or 7 years, right? Like it's not a new thing.
Race World First has been televised now for 5?
4.
I think I mean, I was not a good player before this, but I think the earliest time I remember a weak aura being like needed basically was Maiden in Tomb of Sargeras. Maybe there was a boss way before that I like. Obviously, I didn't play Archimon, so maybe back to Archimon or before, but that's the first one I remember.
Yeah, I do think that the like perspective of this is like pretty interesting, right? Because they think about it from like a casual perspective where they don't necessarily need weak auras, but now they feel like they absolutely have to have them.
Yeah. Yeah, I do understand that like there's a nice thing about some like other games as well sometimes have this, although some other games have it worse where it's like it's expected to use the cheats or whatever that the game developers don't allow, and that's I think even sometimes nastier. But there's a nice thing about other games where it's like you're playing just the game with the base UI and you're not like expected to optimize your UI as part of optimizing your gameplay.
I do think that weak auras have really decreased the ability for skill expression a lot in the game past couple of years. Specifically, I feel like the power of weak auras has gotten a lot more dramatic with how much you're able to track and like how much information you're able to have on the fly, and it really lowers the individual players like skill expression. I feel like.
I think I disagree with that. I think the amount of like decisions and the difference between like the best players and the pretty good players that gap has gotten wider and more noticeable for me at least.
Oh, really?
Over the past year. Like what is weak auras replacing for you? That
imagine not having a CC tracker.
Yeah, like I mean that like so to me like because the skill of like executing those polls involving like referencing a CC tracker and like building and executing that plan is I mean also like either way you would just practice it enough that you had like a full rotation down of those, but I
view it as like that is removed from individual skill into like one or two people calling a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, I guess there's some amount of like there is the ability to offload a lot of brain power cleverly onto certain weak auras on fights, but I don't know if you just look at like how difficult it is to execute an early kill of like Mythic Sarkareth or Mythic Jailer, even though there's weak auras on those fights compared to Mythic whatever. Even if you went back to Garrosh or like Heroic Leishan or whatever, the bosses that people talk about as like being the super high, like when we get to those in Classic, it's gonna be people are gonna be like, oh wait a second, the skill intensity here is like a lot lower than.
Oh no! I don't think that players are worse. I think that the individual ability to be able to like have skill expression is lower.
Okay, to me, the gap between the like world top 20 players and the world top 2 guilds, I see as big or bigger than ever. Like those players are so good, and that skill matters and is expressed in the rating, in my opinion, enough that it's like it's big and apparent. Especially like you watch a player like Fired Up or whatever playing, and it's just like, oh my god,
I guess much better than me.
Yeah, and maybe it's just that the potential was less. People were less close to the ceiling in the past, and weak auras have like lowered the gap between the ceiling and the floor, even though players have gotten closer to the ceiling. But I still think there's like huge skill expression that exists in this game.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, next question comes from Ratrun in Discord that says, when it comes to gearing an alt, what's the best way to do it? I started an Evoker alt, and gearing seems to not be as alt-friendly as I was hoping. Starting at 6s to farm the Drake Crest and any gear I could get, then moved up to 11s to farm the gear I really need is very time-intensive. The Crest upgrade system is great because it's deterministic once you find the loot you're looking for, and I really appreciate the system.
If you do the Mega Dungeon, with somehow in some way you get enough materials to craft a full aspect piece, and you also get like several 430 items, so that's like a really efficient way of doing it.
Yeah,
if you have access to other players that'll do it with you.
That's the thing, is like all of the good ways to gear an alt require doing some group content that might be hard to do on like a fresh alt. A couple of things that don't are doing the whole campaign, and then you can do LFR Sarkareth and you got an Enchanted Worms Crest from that. just getting all of your sparks of Shadow Flame and then crafting 424 with those as well is like a good starting point as well. Although
I
again,
agree with that.
that is gold intensive, right? Like it costs like 50 or 100,000 gold to make a full set of Shadow Flame Spark gear. So if you're trying to use no friends and no gold, it's not actually that fast. Yeah, and like I think 6s into 11s is probably maybe your best bet, and that is a lot slower than like if you can start off with, if you can get into the 11s earlier, that's like or like do a heroic or even a normal raid run. Those are really good gear for your first few weeks.
I was about to say, just make
and the mega dungeon is insane. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, if you're struggling to get invited to a normal, make a normal yourself and then invite people into it. I think that's going to help you out. It's a bit annoying to like set up, but it's going to be faster than you waiting around to get invited on a 4-10 item level character or 4 or 5 item level character.
Yeah, and if those are still worth filling, it's good. Good.
It's definitely the hardest to gear if you're a DPS or healer player without a tank spec. You don't have anyone to like join in on the runs like a heroic raid or the mega dungeon or something, and you have to do it yourself. So like in this situation, I'd probably just start plugging up your own key at +2 so you have control over the group. People will probably eventually join. It is definitely harder and slower than not being a tank in that situation, though.
All right. That is our final question, which means it is the end of our show for this week. We will be back next week with another dungeon and another... We'll try and avoid an augmentation rant, but no promises. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to all the supporters over on the Patreon, as always. Come join our Discord and throw some questions in there if you'd like. Very active community. If you need any help or anything as well, there's a lot of very, very helpful people in there. So shout out to the Discord. Links in the description and stuff wherever you're listening or watching this. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.